Sounds work better than anything. Oops.
Pre-programmed anchors. You'll never go wrong.
Oh, you're just dancing. Okay.
I feel like dancing. Woo, dancing, woo.
So unpredictable.
I know.
Okay, so we have one have some.
I'm always breaking steak.
We shot Breaking Bad, know what I'm saying?
It's freaking good.
Okay.
But I don't put the brakes. I just do more like a
Okay, let's deal with Joe's issue. He has many, but let's talk about habits. And we're going to talk about specifically, how many of you guys have habits you'd like to have more of? Okay, so back when I was studying peak performance and NLP for martial arts training purposes with Dr. John Lazarette, he would talk about something he lovingly called the shit sandwich. Now, this is not necessarily a habit development tool, but it is a procrastination breaking tool. And the way that the structure of this is, you think of something, if there's something that you don't want to do or something you've been putting off, you do something you like, then you do the thing you don't want to do or have been hesitating, and then you give yourself a nice big activity that you would like afterwards, that you have something to look forward to after you've done it. So the functional term is shit sandwich, right? That goes in line. There's a great book for those of you who are interested in habit work. In fact, I'm probably going to do a whole identity by design or self-mastery supercharger level 2, all on habit work. And one of the big resources for that is going to be Atomic Habits. It's a book, great book. For those of you in the influence and behavioral influence fields, extremely useful book on a lot of different levels. But one of the techniques he talks about in that book is called habit stacking. And the way this works is you take something that a good habit that you do, something you like to do, something that is just useful for you, like brushing your teeth, and you link a new habit to that, right? There was I forget what it's Denise Desir. It was a French poet who was poor most of his life, and then one day he received a 100,000 pound or 1,000 gold ducat or whatever it was. It was equivalent to $100,000 in those times from some royalty who was a big fan of his writing. And the first thing he did is he went out and bought this really nice coat, right? And then he looked at his coat, and he looked at all the raggedy clothes next to the coat, and he said, that doesn't fit, it doesn't work. So he started buying newer stuff, and he just kept buying and buying and buying. And the whole idea is one habit triggers a domino effect of other habits, right? It's like you can't eat just one potato chip, right? Small habit leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. So you can take this and use it in what we call habit stacking. So you take the habit that you already have, that's already in place, and you link the habit that you want more of to that. So like every time you brush your teeth, you automatically floss, right? Or every time you weigh yourself, you go drink 8 ounces of water. You install the new habit immediately following a habit you already have. But make it small. Make it a small, innocuous, common habit, one that's already hardwired in, and it will make it easy to keep that momentum going. Okay? Now, if we're, as hypnotists, we can accelerate this process, especially by using identity by design. We can go in, we can clear all the blocks to taking action to begin with, and then we can rehearse mentally in the state X, Y. X causes Y. X, it's a cause and effect structure. Brush your teeth, floss. Weigh yourself, drink water, right? You just link those habits together, and then you can create whole chains and sequences of that based on what? Something you've already linked in. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, great story with a quote, poet.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it's in the book, so I forget the author's name, but it was...
There's another, I don't know if it's the same book, but it's Light H with Jeff Olson. He talks about the, small habits.
Yeah, because you've already done the work. If you think about it, neurologically speaking, you've already done the work.
Yeah.
You've created the neurological pathway. It's already automated, right? So link it, right? That's this. And those of you who've been in my earlier classes, what I say, in NLP, one of the big presuppositions in NLP is that the clients have all the resources that they need to create any change they want. It's one of the biggest lies in NLP. Because if they had all the resources they needed, they wouldn't be in your fucking chair. Right? The one resource they don't have is you. Because you're the one that knows how to help them find the resources or create the resources within themselves. Right? So when I teach you, and the reason I brought that up, that was just a sidebar. But what I teach you guys when it goes to resourcing, if I have to choose between creating a resource through imagination or tapping into a pre-existing resource based on a memory or series of experiences, I go with the series of experiences first. Why? Amplitude. The neurological pathways have been rehearsed, set in, built up. There's more push to it. I can still use the imagined resource, but I got to use a lot more repetition and emotion to get it to work. So don't make your job harder.
Yes.
Utilize something they're already doing well, link something to it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from my TJ's gone. Where's my TJ gone? Jeff, by the way, do you have anything you want to learn this week? Or are you just here for the beer? Which means you're in deep shit.
Well, you see, I didn't have breakfast, so that shit sandwich is sounding.
There's actually some really good cookies over there that TJ brought. I think it was TJ.
No, Joe brought
Oh,
it.
Joe brought them? All right, Joe, you're on my happy list
Thanks,
now.
Joe. You're welcome.
So that's one I would start with. List a bunch of innocuous habits: tying your shoes, wiping your butt. Kind of one we're not going to forget, right? But whatever it is, link it to something you're doing, right? And just keep doing it. Yeah.
And then you can, just abstract, but then you can run through that whole sequence of the whole day. Whole
Once the
week.
new habit is installed, now it becomes usable as a paste.
Yeah. And then you can use that actual experience of going through the habits to reinforce that once again, and so on and so forth.
So again, we can take we have a basic process, then we can use the tools of altered states, hypnosis, NLP, to accelerate and deepen it. Would it just work if you just did it by rote? Yes. Can we make it better? Theoretically. Right? Is that useful? Okay. Okay. Diderot, that's the guy's name, Denis Diderot. French poet. For those of you who are into French poetry. Of course. Okay. It looks like we're moving into, well, a good place to segue into energetics is actually your favorite and mine, face reading. Or not. Where do I put it? Oh, I'll just do it the hard way. Oh, I don't want to do it the hard way. I want to do it the easy way. I have so many pages. This is from CPI 2. Where did I put that? There we go. All right, let me just erase this stuff. All right, so first and foremost, face reading is actually one of the oldest, is an element of Chinese medicine. So most of you know I finished my doctorate in November. That was a climactic experience. One I'll need therapy for the next 2 years. But fortunately, I know a guy. And if you go to some of the earliest books on Chinese medicine, the very first page after you open the cover is a picture of all the facial markings on the face. It was a valid form of Chinese medical diagnosis. Still is used predominantly in more of the traditional approaches today. Not so much in TCM, although facial colorations and things like that are still quite often used. But there's a whole other deeper level science to this. And this is where we start to verge into this idea of holographic memory as well as the totality of the human being being a holographic vibrational construct, a series of interlocking vibrational filters. Think in terms of, okay, why won't you move? Anyway, yeah, we all know what a filter is, right? Or a prism, rather, right? White light goes in, and then you have red and yellow and green and blue, because this bends the light, right? We all know how a prism works. Human beings and their chakra systems, if you want to use the esoteric side of it, if you want to use it in terms of that, is basically the equivalent of a vibrational prism. The filters that energy passes through, that information passes through, are refracted, and they express you. This is why when you start working with people and unpacking the emotions and markings of the face, their faces change. Sometimes very dramatically right in front of you. But faces change over time anyway. How many people have, I don't know if I can pull it up right now. There's some pictures. And take your time, why don't you? Face reading, face reading, face reading. Here we go. Lillian has some great examples in her book. Or not. Okay, maybe I won't use it today. Anyway, Lillian has some great examples in her book of couples, the pictures of the couples taken like 30 years apart. One on the day they got married or when they were dating, another 30 years later, marriage, and the faces have changed. They've morphed to look like each other. You see the same thing happen with people and their pets. Why? It's morphic resonance. Okay? The more rapport we become, the more our filters start to align, the more we have the same refractions. Okay? When we're dealing with matchmaking, which was an application that face reading was used for extensively, business work, legal work, as well as matchmaking. You want as many facial features similar to the partner as possible. The more the features are similar in nature, the more compatible they tend to be. Okay? Yeah. So you'll see, once again, like we've talked about in NLP, like we've talked about in vibrational influence, is that there's a feedback loop always going on that is pacing and leading and matching and mirroring people's gestures a way to get rapport, or is it a sign of rapport? The answer is yes. So there's always that feedback loop going on. We talked about this in CPI too. When you start telling stories, the hemispheres of the listener's brain start to sync and align with the storyteller. And at first, it lags behind. Then it keeps pace, and then it starts to predict. Because the human neurology is always predicting what's going to happen next and then correcting for the error. Right? So you see how all this starts to kind of come together? Right? So the idea is connection is always about matching vibration. Okay? And the consequence of matching those vibrations is you're going to start to look like the people you connect with. Okay? And to a greater or lesser. I've literally seen, like during a hypnosis session, someone comes in, has had a very suppressed life, their power has been kind of beaten down, and you remove those blocks and they step back into their power and their brow bone goes poof. It's like the proverbial turkey baster. When the turkey's done, it pops out. It's like at the beginning of the session, she had dark eyebrows but very flat. By the end, she had this roof shooting out of her forehead. It was like, woo, I'm a plastic surgeon, didn't know it. So when we look at the face, if I can do this here. Why is it? There we go. The first thing we want to do before we start getting into emotions, I think Microsoft is just out to get me. And it's high comedy watching me do this, because I go through this shit every single time that I have to deal with. Alrighty then.
Got it.
All right. We'll talk about peach luck. Probably, I don't know if we'll get to it today. That's something more for charisma training. But the first thing I want to talk about is, in terms of looking at somebody's head, you have 3 zones. And how many of you have a training in handwriting analysis or anything like that? None of you? Okay. So the first thing you want to look at is you want to divide the head. Hold on a second.
Not with the baseball bat.
Yeah. Well, depends on your attitude, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay, why are you? Oh, there we go. You want to divide the head into right and left.
Okay.
Right side of the face is public persona. This is the face we show the world. This is how we want to be perceived by the people outside. Left side of the face is your private side. If you ever have an opportunity, there's an app, I don't know if it's still around, it's called Facer, which actually takes a picture of you and then it divides your face in half and then it superimposes two right sides together and two left sides together, and you can see you have very, very different faces. Okay? So you can look at how people are versus how they want to be. Because most people tend to be right eye dominant, we tend to look at the right side of the face through our right eye. So we only see the public persona. So when we look at people, we want to know what's going on privately with them. We want to look through our left eye at the left side of their face. Okay, and you'll notice that there's an asymmetry in most people's faces, right? Okay, so factor that in. When you're dealing with people out in the business world, you want to relate to them as they want to be seen. You want to play to the image they're saying to the world. If you want to influence them intimately, you play to their private face. How do we do that? Criterion values. Criterion values. You just list their criterion values, which goes right to their emotional reasons for why they do everything. But criterion values are context dependent, so you can use it anywhere. But echo is always echo. You're never wrong echoing, whether it's professional or personal. You're never going to be wrong echoing. But remember, we want to get them neurologically engaged. But remember, the Chinese didn't have the benefit of criterion values elicitation, right? They were going to look at somebody and know who they were in public versus how different they were in private. Right? And that's why asymmetrical faces, really exceedingly asymmetrical faces, creep us out. One of the key indicators of physical attraction is facial symmetry. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The face you show the world versus who you really are.
Like Grant Cardone.
Yeah. Okay. So those are two things that I think that we would start with. When we start looking at the geography of the head, and how it relates to how people think and process information, we want to look at 3 zones. Upper zone, middle zone, lower zone. Your upper zone is your mental zone. Hold on a second. Let me do this. Why is that so big?
That's what she said.
I knew somebody was going to jump in there.
DJ, you were quiet the whole time.
He was just waiting.
For the right moment.
Anyway, so the upper zone, let me do this. The upper zone is your mental zone. This is somebody who's very data driven, right? How many people ever met my, well, look at, Joe, pull your hairline up. See that forehead?
Yeah.
That's a data forehead. See that forehead? That's a data forehead. Data forehead. Right? Very, very large upper zone. You measure from the rim of the eyebrow to the hairline. Bigger that, and you have to look at that. Yeah, you're pretty balanced up in here.
Yeah.
You have a very rectangular face, actually somewhat
Until
triangular.
I was my
yeah.
hair, then
Yeah.
it's gonna
So if you look at where he is here, and I do this, you see how different the zones are.
Yeah.
So people who have a very large upper zone. How many people met my partner Brandon with Nlppower? Okay, you ever see his head? He looks like a crown diamond. You ever see that flat marquise cut? He's like here, and he's like got no chin down here, right? He's got this big triangular head, right? The guy's in love with spreadsheets. Every time I start talking about business, my eyes cross because he starts referencing spreadsheet after spreadsheet. He's a data cruncher. So if you start talking to him about passion and pleasure and impulse and spontaneity, he's gonna like, huh? He's not. It's not going to resonate as much. Why? Because he's data first. Right? When you start working with people who have a highly developed middle zone, these are people who are extremely practical, very pragmatic. They want to know how they can use it, how it's going to work for them, how it's going to make their life easier, how many things they can do with it. To get a little risque, to quote the great Steve P. Whenever confronted with something interesting but obviously useless information, he would say, "How is that going to get me more blowjobs?" Right? That was his test. How can I use it? How's it going to make my life easier? So when you got somebody who's got a very developed middle zone, that's what you lead with. You lead with how's that going to make their life easier? How's it going to get them more money? How's it going to get them make them have to work less hard? Does that make sense? People who have a very strong lower zone, these people are very instinctive, emotional, and often intuitive. They make decisions instinctively. They tend to be very intuitive. They're not going to be as focused on the data.
Emotional.
They're gonna have a gut feeling about something, and they're gonna do it. They tend to be a little bit more spontaneous, right? Which would drive data crunchers crazy. Right? They'll often come to the same conclusion, just differently. Right?
Is it true for guys that have more testosterone level when they have jaw like?
Well, think about what happens when you have an abundance of testosterone. What happens to the jaw? What happens to your emotional reactivity? Don't you get? What happens when you have too much roids going on? You get very explosive and aggressive, don't you? But it's not just explosive and aggressive. You get triggered faster. Right? You're more spontaneous. You're more emotional. You're more instinctive. Right? Right? It just makes you more of what you already are.
And part of the side effects of taking the testosterone is the jaw grows. So
Because it makes you more aggressive, right? And you'll see that if you're someone who's, like I have a lot of wood, but I have what I call yin wood. So most of my yin is internal. If I would start training really hard and doing a lot of that stuff, after I got done tearing my body down and gave myself enough time, my jaw would go. You'd see it.
And the eyes as well.
The eyebrows, the eyebrow bones themselves are wood areas, and the jaw itself is very powerful. If you want to look at, TJ has a great story about when he was actually researching face shapes and stuff like that. You want to talk about that?
At the,
You want to come up here? Disembodied voice from nowhere.
yes. Hello, video.
By the way, just as an aside, look at Katie's face. Here's her temples. Here's her cheekbones. What's she?
Lower.
No.
No? No, that was
Middle.
Strong middle zone. You see how big,
Okay.
right? She's also, her cheekbones also tell us when the cheekbones have a little bit of a slant behind. These are people who are very adventurous, right? But she likes to go to interesting places and do interesting things, not necessarily take physical risks, but she'll try a new restaurant. She'll go to a new country. That's kind of, she's okay with that. You have the same thing. You have very, very powerful cheekbones, right? Right? She's very connected to her family. You can tell that by the way the earlobes connect to the ears. Now that may or may not be a good connection. It's, right? Yeah. It's not about whether you like them or not, but they strongly impact you and you're still kind of connected to them. Right. Somebody raised a hand or something? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
At the one of the locations that we do a lot of our trainings at, it's over by Qualcomm, their main offices and stuff like that. Well, they've got a food court there, and we'd been going over all of this stuff, and I went to go grab some food. While I'm waiting for my order, I started looking around. Foreheads this big, jaws almost non-existent throughout the entire food court area, and I went, oh, we're by Qualcomm. These are all
Eggheads. Brainiacs.
big time.
Right?
And so when you start looking at your environment, if you're wondering what kind of industry is going around, I did construction for years. What do you think you see in construction areas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to an MMA gym. Go to, not a CrossFit gym per se, but maybe an MMA gym, and look at the jawlines, look at the brow bones, right? There's a physiognomy that optimizes you for specific activities, right? And it's not an accident.
How about you? People like you have done so many things in life. Like, how is that not so much related? Like starting from cars and you do this.
Ask him once.
Well, you tell me.
What do you see on my face when you look?
Sort of symmetrical.
The sense of purpose, a
Yeah.
very strong sense of purpose.
But am I balanced or am I predominantly? What's that?
I said balanced.
Yeah.
Look at the three zones. And by the way, it's not. Here's the takeaway. You're not one. You're all three. But there's a processing order. Right? So if I'm looking at somebody, for Katie, for example, all right, she has a real strong middle zone. She's got a pretty good lower zone, and then the upper zone. So I'm going to talk to her about all the ways she can use what we're going to take, so it's going to make her life awesome. She's going to have the best time ever, and then I'm going to show you all the facts. Look at her. I present the information. I present the information based on the physiognomy. Right? So and that actually has a loose correlation to Myers-Briggs, thinker, feeler, judger. Right? Intuitor versus sensor. Right? So just ideas. There are if we start thinking of things in terms of the neurology, you'll start to see correlations. Right? And that's, again, what I do at home at night when the power's out.
And so for like you with car sales, you could use this stuff, start looking at their makeup, and if you see somebody with high brow
Data.
this car has higher safety statistics, we've got these statistics, the if you go to the Kelly Blue Book, you're going to find all of these
Numbers.
things. If you see this here,
Emotion.
when they see you driving this thing, yeah, we're going to bring you over to the truck. Yeah, this thing, yeah, it's got, yeah, and we, this one, think of all the places that you'll be able to take this car, what you're going to be able to share with your family, what kind of experiences you're going to be able to use. These are the different ways that you can use this technology.
All right. That's just two things, left and right,
Thank you.
lower, middle, high.
Thank you, TJ.
All right, very quick stuff. Thank you, T. All right, so I think now's the time for an exercise.
Hey.
Let's go read each other's faces. Now, can I pick on you, Jeff? Come on up here, bud. Are you very physical?
Pardon me?
Are you very physical?
A bit.
A bit.
Colonel guy.
Colonel guy. Look at his jaw. Jeff likes his pleasure. Right. You see how Stefan has a similar jawline. You see how big this jaw is? This guy's got a lot of willpower. This guy will fight for what he believes is right. Right? If he thinks something's right, he's going to stand up. He's not going to cave just because the rest of the group is caving. Okay? When you have a big jaw, you have someone who's very, very idealistic, very, very willful, with a tendency to being stubborn. They also tend to be good at athletics. All right? When you start to develop a lot of bone here, it starts to become a little bit more problematic. It starts to become more, it can go one of two ways. If it's very soft, it tends to be more hedonistic. If it becomes very hard and very bony, it tends to become more dictatorial. These people crave and demand and need power over other people, right? And again, I'm not saying he's that. I don't know him. I'm not saying he's that way or not. But and it doesn't have to be bad. It can be people who just they like to be in control. They like to tell people what to do and make sure things are getting done, because that's how they are, right? But that's something that you want to look. When you see somebody who's got those big, pronounced, you're looking at somebody who you got to align with their values really, really quick, or you're going to be butting heads left and right. They don't like to be told what to do, right? If you got somebody who has a very weak or soft jawline, these people tend to have more situational ethics. They're easily swayed, and they'll change their emotional outlook based on the dynamics of the group or environment. Okay? Thank you, Jeff. Big round of applause.
Out of curiosity, what kind of work do you do, Jeff?
I'm in real estate.
Okay. Cool.
Which in Indiana is a lot more affordable than
Is that where you're from, Indiana?
Yes.
Cool. So this is fun. If you want to look at, and what's interesting about dictatorial jawlines is that most people who develop them don't start with them. If you look at early pictures of Mussolini, Stalin, or Hitler, or actually not Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Idi Amin, you can see the after pictures. They have these, Saddam Hussein, huge jawlines. But if you look at the younger pictures, the faces are more rectangular or oval. They develop, something causes them to develop. It may be the choices they make. It may be the environment that they're in. Maybe a common, I don't know what it is. But they tend to develop those jawlines. Now, if you get someone who's got like a head like a cinder block, like really super square, these are like your superhero soldier type. They're like,
Yeah.
right? You see the consummate military general is a square head, right? Very earthy, very solid, very relentless in how they do things. So that you can start to kind of extrapolate, right? Doesn't mean they're always this way. These are just the trends. Does that make sense? Yeah. But it's reliable enough for 3,000 years that they're still using it. So what I'd like us to do now is I'd like to just start playing with this idea of looking at zones and looking at right side, left side. Then we'll come back and we'll start looking at some emotions, and then maybe we'll do some more we'll do some more readings, and see how we go with that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take 20 minutes for this. Do at least 3 people as the subject, 3 people as the as the reader, and we'll come back and we'll build on that. You guys at home, find a face and read it.
Cool.
Yep.
Oh, wait, that's my partner.
Time fun?
Thank you.
Of course. Yes, I do. You and I. Just bring a chair over.
Left is private.
It looks like the,
I'm always with my
You can go out on the patio.
side.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get. I couldn't get to Stephanie in time to tell her.
I left at 8. Yeah, right at 8. I got your right now.
I didn't even see her until like.
Oh, okay. So that's.
I didn't tell the patient. Well, actually, no, it's not true. He was standing. Stephanie wasn't here. She wasn't here. And if she was, I didn't see her. No, the guy was waiting on that side. Nobody ever came to talk to him. The door was open, but Anthony was in with a patient, and Stephanie was nowhere. Talk to TJ. He talked to the guy a little bit more.
well, this side has more of a,
So you can divide it.
And you use it in your work?
takes a 4 on the side, and it goes out like this, and it goes out more like that, right? Sunk in.
No, but for
This
this
is more,
exercise, it's more like, right?
Okay, gotcha.
There's that in, but
You haven't seen me what?
I started doing about a year ago. I started.
it just doesn't. Your other side is progression, that's how you just tell this is the private side. That might also be more. You're not a warrior.
Put on my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.